This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
All right, fans of the Books of Babel, we have a special episode for you today, an episode we are very excited for at Fantology. I'm your host, Stephen, as always, and I have my lifelong friend Ryan with me. Ryan, are you excited right now?
I am probably more excited than I've been in any other podcast we've recorded.
Ooh, okay. Well, keep on listening then, I suppose. And the reason for your excitement is, of course, that we have a special guest. We have Josiah Bancroft himself, author of the Books of Babel, on with us to talk a little bit about his new book. We're not going to do any spoilers for the series. We want to kind of talk about the Books of Babel in general, talk about your story a bit, Josiah, and your writing process and all of that fun stuff. So I think it should be an interesting episode. So if you're a fan of the series, definitely continue listening.
And if you're not, bow out now, because there's going to be a lot of this.
If you're not, you should be. Like, I really don't know what's going on, because this is a series that we just recently picked up at Fantology after a lot of recommendations, and we have loved it. 4 out of the 5 Fantology members have been reading through, and we really just have a lot of positive things to say. I mean, on the reviews, we're kind of funny. We try to come up with criticisms, etc. But overall, our reviews are very positive. We've really enjoyed the books. So that, bravo, Josiah. Thank you so much for writing these for us.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here and talking with you guys.
My first question for you is, how do we know that it's not an evil twin named Sharon that is here with us? Just because your Zoom name says Sharon Bancroft.
Right. That's my tell for who has in the past made all the money in the relationship, like the one who could afford the Zoom accounts that I just glom onto. So that's, I am her lesser half. I do write more fantasy, but that's about the only thing I have going for me. Okay. I'm taller too. Like, if you ever want to get something off the top shelf, I'm your guy. Don't call Sharon. She can't get it.
Does she write? Does she write at all?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No. But she's just like a finished human being with maturity and a professional career. And
okay.
Then, hey, how are you over here? Here I am. You want to know about some imaginary fawns who have mechanical arms and snarky comments? I'm your guy.
Well, it sounds like we got the guy for the podcast then.
Second question: is that pillow behind you, if you're watching on Zoom, is that a Byron pillow?
No, it's just green. It's a regular green pillow.
No, the other one, the one with the
this one,
the
one that,
yes,
this,
that one.
Oh yeah, this is my buddy Byron. We're such fast friends. We both had pillows printed up of each other, and his lounge is one of me, which I think is better looking, but it's not bad. It's not bad.
Is there any particular story behind that pillow? Did somebody have that made for you?
No. I found it on the road, and it was a sign that I should have it. I think it's just random sort of happenstance.
After you had already created the character Byron.
Oh, long after, yes.
Okay.
Long after. It was, I think it was a sign from the Sphinx. It was how I take it. Yeah.
So Byron, if you haven't read the books, Byron is a character from the story. You probably picked up on that. So to get us started, Josiah, tell everyone a little bit about your start as an author. You have a really interesting story that I think some know, maybe some don't. But how did the Books of Babel catch on, and what's your journey been?
Okay, I have to give this like the short version, because it could go on for, I don't know, like a whole 2 minutes. Basically, I originally decided to self-publish a novel after failing at poetry for many years. And the first step, of course, to self-publishing a novel is writing one. So I set out to write a novel. I was around 35 years old, working in a community college as a teacher. I'd never finished a novel before, but I thought the best thing to do if you're going to write a novel is plan a series of 4 or 5. So, I decided to write a series of novels from the gate. I sat down and wrote said novel, Sin Limit Sins. It's about a headmaster who goes on his honeymoon with his young bride to the Tower of Babel, and the moment that he arrives, he loses her in the crowd. And so the story really begins there, though that's really not encompassing of everything that happens. So, I decided to self-publish this novel. I did so. Nobody cared in the traditional sort of, self-publishing way. I fought for myself by going to conventions. I put on the tutu and the ballet shoes and danced in aisles and convention halls, trying to drum up some interest in the books. That did not go very well. I decided to write the sequel, Arm of the Sphinx, because the first one had been so well received. That also was not very popular. I think after 2 or 3 years, I had one written review on Goodreads. And then I decided at that point to quit. I decided to stop writing the series that I had in mind because it was embarrassing. At some point you're like, the world says no, and it's your duty just to say, okay. And so I decided to stop writing the books. The last thing I did before I quit, while I was working on the third book, The Hod King, I sent the first book, The Sin of Sins, to Mark Lawrence's self-publishing contest, the SPFBO. I did not make it to the next round, so my book was booted. But the reviewer gave it was sufficiently enticing to Mark Lawrence that he read it on a lark. He read it, liked it, decided to contact me and say, hey, I like this. And I said, oh, thank you. Then he also gave it to his agent. His agent said, this is pretty good. I said, oh, thank you. And then they sent it to publishers, and the publishers said, hey, this is pretty good. And I said, oh, thank you. And they published it. And here we are. It's been an unlikely journey. And after it started gaining traction, I resumed my work on the third book and finished the fourth, which is coming out in a week. So yeah, is it 2 minutes? I try to stuff it all in there.
How long was the process from when you had written started writing Senlin Ascends to the point where Mark put you in contact with his agent?
I started writing Senlin Ascends in 2011, and Mark put me in touch with his agent in 2016. This is 5 years.
Okay.
Which is, I want like writers to know that sometimes miracles happen very slowly. It's not always like the next year.
Yeah, this is a great story in perseverance. Like I could see some inspirational TED Talks or something.
No. I'm a quitter who got lucky. I mean, I got a lot of quit in me. Like whenever the coach was like, "You gonna quit, boy?" I was like, "Oh yeah, is that an option? Can I go back to the showers?" I didn't know you could quit. I want a juice box. Why are we even doing this? I quit. And so I would never hold myself up as some sort of exemplar of tenacity, because I'm not. I got lucky. I persisted for a while because I was stubborn. But I suppose that the thing about luck is it increases your odds as you do persist. But it's miraculous and sort of silly that I lasted as long as I did.
Well, you wrote 2 books before you gave up, so I think that's a lot more than some people can say.
I was really certain. I was really sure that this was going to hit. But I was also like, when I published the second book, Arm of the Sphinx, I was like, I'm going to like follow Atwood's current model for self-publishing, where she released her new novel in sections. And so that's why if you go on Goodreads, Arm of the Sphinx is split into 3 sections with different covers. Still, there's like this like vestigial sort of artifact. And that's because I was like, the problem is I haven't quite got the model right, as I'll emulate Atwood, because I'm Margaret Atwood. That was the problem. I mean, very naive.
I think when you say you're lucky, you're being pretty modest, because you had a work here that was really, quite good, especially for a first self-published effort, and you have some background in writing, so I don't think it's surprising that it came off so well. But we were reading Senlin Ascends thinking like, wow, this is a first book. This is amazing, especially for that. So I guess my question is, after you got connected to the agent and you published formally, traditionally. Was there another editorial process after that to like brush up anything in similar sense? Because you said it didn't advance to the end of the contest, which kind of makes me think like maybe some revisions were made, or was it just published as it was from 2011?
There really weren't. There were, I think, like two continuity errors because I didn't know how to do math. So my math was bad on a couple of like moments where I was like, 7 + 5 is probably 13 or so. I mean, let's like, no, it's not 13 or so. You have to like get that right. So there was like, I think, two continuity things, a couple of typos, but they didn't make any substantive changes to the work. I didn't take that as I didn't take the fact that I did not advance in the contest as some sort of repudiation of what I had done. Sin in a Sense is a weird book. It's not your standard sort of like fantasy fare. It's not to say that it's better or worse. It's just a little weird. And so when Jared, the reviewer for Pornikitch, was like, I have to choose this other book, I didn't begrudge him that. Like I admit it's odd. Everything I'm doing here is a little bit odd. Doesn't mean it's good, but I do have sympathy for people who don't enjoy it.
I think that's fair, but it was very endearing to us, at least, like just the unique take on fantasy, kind of this zany steampunk thing. Like it's very like, for me, it was very appealing. So I wanted to ask you, like, what was your inspiration for that? Why did you decide to go off in this unique direction? Because you could have, I'm sure you could have just written kind of more of a traditional epic fantasy. This is what others are writing, but it seems like you wanted to do something a little bit different.
I have said many times, or actually I've heard many times from my friends and family, like, why don't you just write like a popular book? Why don't you just sell out and write something with young men riding dragons? Like, come on, like that's where the money is. And the truth is, I can't. I think that this is the book I could write. I enjoyed writing it. It was an experience, but it's also the first novel I ever finished. Like, I had been writing failed novels since I was in my early 20s. I finished this one in my mid 30s. And the way that I finished it is I just stopped trying to like write a good book. I stopped trying to write a marketable book. I just wrote the book that I could write, that I wanted to write, the book that I wanted to read. And so, and that all sounds like, terrible, like twee and cliche, but it's true. It's just, this is the first novel as an adult that I finished. And the reason I was able to finish it is I just stopped trying to figure out what people want, figure out what I should write, and I just wrote exactly what I wanted to write. So yeah, if someone said like, "Can you write the sequel to Game of Thrones next entry?" I would absolutely not be able to do that if someone held me at gunpoint. That's just a different, wonderful talent, but I don't have it.
I mean, I think I heard something similar from Brandon Sanderson, in which for a while, when he was trying to break into writing, he tried to write what he thought would be well received. And after a long time of trying, he just fell flat on his face, and he didn't find success until after he finally started writing what he wanted to write. And so I think that's something to be said for doing writing as a passion. I mean, you can try all you want to fake something, and some people might have success for that, or maybe not even fake it, but
Conform,
right? What maybe. People, conform yourself to what people want to hear. But people, I think in general, find greater success as they apply their uniqueness to their creative endeavors.
Well, that's something I do appreciate about Sanderson, is I think that he is a very sincere writer. And I think that sincerity as a writer is important. If I fail, if someone doesn't like my book, I can at least feel like, well, that was the book that I wanted to write. That, this is a sincere endeavor. There are writers who I admire who are writing to a specific audience in a genre for the sort of more mainstream purpose of entertainment, and that's also wonderful. Like, there's not like any right or wrong way to do this. I don't feel like my way is the one, but I do appreciate when I encounter other writers who have taken the same sort of path that I have, which is one of, I don't know how to write the book you want me to write. I can only write the book that I know how to write, and that's what I did.
So, who are some of your favorite contemporary authors? Maybe this is a little bit of a loaded question.
It's not loaded. I tell you, I am often in love with the last thing that I read. And I will also say that when I'm writing, drafting a new work as I am now, I tend to read more classic, older stuff because I feel like if I get too much into the contemporary voice, I begin to kind of emulate it because I am a mimic. If I hung out with people of any accent for 3 days, I would pick that accent up. And it's just because I have like that sort of personality. And so I can't really dive into new stuff as much as I would like to. But that said, like Harrow, Alex Harrow, her work I've recently really enjoyed. Fonda Lee's work has been she's really great at plotting and developing these complex familial structures. And I that's something that's just like a talent that I don't have. And so like, when I read Jade City years ago, I was very impressed. There are a lot of contemporary fantasy writers who I admire. Right now, I'm not reading a lot of their work. I'm reading a lot of sort of nonfiction researching stuff because I'm trying to write something different. But the last book that I read that I was just really knocked out by was probably Connie Willis, her book, about the dog. What's it called? Something about the dog. Connie Willis's. Edit this out and I will come up with it in like 20 minutes. To say nothing of the dog. Oh my God, I can't believe I got that. So I read that a couple of months ago and it just stuck with me because Connie Willis has this like ability with humor and language that I find very impressive. So there's always someone to admire, and I have been reading less fiction recently, but there's a lot of great stuff going on right now.
Was there any specific work or series or author that really inspired like parts of the Books of Babel or anything you really drew upon for that series?
Yeah, I would say that it was so at the time that I started writing this book, I was not really reading fantasy. I was teaching literature. I had been, I got my degree in literature. That's like what my background was in. And so a lot of the stuff I was reading was poetry, prose poetry, kind of modernist stuff. And so the books were really taking a lot of their DNA from Italo Calvino, Thomas Mann, Günter Grass, Camus, Kafka, because that's just what I had been reading at the time. I don't love to say that now because it just sounds like a parade of white dudes. But that's sort of like where I was at that point. So I would say Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities was the genesis for the sort of the germ of the concept, because that's this imaginary travelogue, and that's sort of what the Everyman's Guide to the Tower of Babel is. But then there's this movie by Fritz Lang from 1920s called Metropolis. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like an old silent picture. And if you go back and watch this Art Nouveau movie, you'll just see how I filched most of my ideas from it. So it was a love letter to Calvino after I watched Fritz Lang, and I just mashed them together, put some Douglas Adams in there, and that was sort of the genesis of the whole idea.
Definitely Douglas Adams. My comparison, and this is going to sound kind of stupid after you listed off a bunch of more well-known classical works, but my comparison was the series of Unfortunate Events, which was like my childhood and has a lot of the same types of like absurdist humor that you throw in.
Great literature, wonderful work. Absolutely. I would be honored to have that association. Absolutely.
So you hinted at some studies, some research you're doing for a new series. Is that anything that you can say anything about, or is that still kind of on lockdown at this point?
No, I can talk about it because it's in its nascency, but I do have like 80% of the book done. the draft done, and we all know that like a draft is still very much a sketch, but it's called the Hexologists. It's more of a mystery. I wanted to try something very different from the Books of Babel, but it still has a sort of like it's character centric. I care a lot about the prose because that's just how I write. I want to have that humor. It's going to be, I think, lighter in tone, more familiar in its trappings to fans of fantasy, in the sense there'll be more magic, more creatures, more fantastical happenings, but still set in kind of a modern era. So I that's what I'm working on. The things I'm researching are what I usually end up researching, was just like, how does a forest grow? And it really has not a lot to do with the book, but I just kind of get interested in things, let me learn about quarries, and then it's I go in meaning to research the cult, or the history, the folklore surrounding witchcraft, and I just end up looking at castles because I'm a nerd. So.
I mean, I can tell you did a lot of research for the Books of Babel, probably a lot around like airships and how that type of like flight would work, and maybe like large structures and engines, just kind of speaking vaguely about some elements in the series. So I'm assuming those were things that you had to do research on.
I did, and I was, so I was working at college. I actually roped in my research librarians to help me, and they came back with some wonderful documents from like 1890 British airship, like the air.
I like the Zeppelins back then.
But they're military. It wasn't the Navy. It was the Air Force, but it wasn't. That's not what it's called. The ARC. No, that's not it. AFR. No, AFL. It's a combination of letters that I can't remember right now. Oh God.
The Royal Air Force or
Air
whatever.
Force.
Like,
that sounds yes, that sounds right. So the RAF. Yeah, that's right. They found like these original documents with all these sort of like procedures and schematics and write-ups about like airships and dirigibles, and that was essential to just my sort of basic understanding of how these things might work in the physical world. Anyone who knows anything about airships will tell you, and dirigibles, zeppelins, blimps, will tell you that I messed up a lot, and they are right. But it's fantasy. I did my best,
Right.
I think the great thing is that most of your readers aren't going to be experts on air flight or zeppelins or blimps. Like I am not, and so I loved it. There's maybe 0.001% of people will say that's not how that works.
I have gotten letters. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure every author gets letters at some point for something they did incorrectly.
But you can always,
game.
That's the beauty of fantasy. You can always say, well, there's magic, so it works.
Yeah, and I appreciate that kind of escape hatch. I'm always disappointed I got things wrong, but telling a story is, you get a lot of moving pieces, a lot of stuff that you're learning on the fly. A lot of my readers have asked me, did you know exactly how all this was going to finish up in the final chapter? I'm like, well, I had like the pieces, but the only way to learn how to write a series is, unfortunately, to write a series. And so, it took me 10 years. And so I learned a lot along the way, but, I can't pretend that the whole thing was encased in my noggin from the start. There's things you discover, there's things you realize won't work, and it's an art. It's not a science, and that's just part of it.
I think one of the things we found as we've reviewed a lot of different series is that ending a series is really hard, and you'll get a lot of opinions. It's like, oh gosh, this was okay, but this was terrible. It's really hard to please everyone with an ending. So you just ended a series, or at least you did a while ago, and now the end is finally coming out. So what were some of the challenges that you faced there? Like, how did you deal with ending your series? Like you said, the only way to do it is to do it.
When you get to the great thing about middle books is you are serving your whim, and the awful thing about your final book is you're serving the plot, and that's just unavoidable in some ways. So there's all these things that you have teased for many books, all these things you have promised to unravel or solve or answer these questions, etc. And so while your second and third book is all this sort of casting out of lines, and the final book you have to reel them all in. I had never done that before. I knew it was going to come, but even with all the preparations I made, it was still a challenge. And it's a challenge not just in the sense of like, oh, is everyone satisfied with what you did, but just the enormity of it. Like 3 books as a sort of setup is hard to solve in one book. At least it was for me. It was a learning experience. I don't know if I would ever do it again. Like I think the thing about writing a series for me is it made me realize that my favorite thing about writing are the characters, are their like interpersonal stories, their sort of incidental interactions. The big plot, the sort of frame of the story, it's just not as it's not what I am as good at. If I'm good at anything. So I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. I'm glad that some people enjoy it. People who are disappointed, that's fair. I did my best. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Did you have this all of these major decisions outlined from the beginning, or do you, I mean, you did say that you have, I mean, some of it outlined, or some of the pieces in your head at least, or are you discovering these things along with the characters?
It's both. I mean, it's both. Yeah, it's both. When I was in the second part of the first book, in the baths and Sinless Sins, I realized like I had to start making some decisions, because when I initially started, there was in the back of my head this idea that like, oh, I'll just have one part for every ringdom, and there's 64 ringdoms, and so that will be 64 parts divided by 3. That will be, I'm bad at math, but that's a lot of books. That's a lot of books. And I was like halfway through the second part, and I was like, that's ridiculous. I can't write 20 books. And so then I had to like really start to think about what the major arc that I wanted to pursue in the series would be. And I hammered that out. And the thing that I vacillated between is like, whether it's me 4 or 5 books. And I think that the problem that you see, well, not the problem, the difference you see between Arm of the Sphinx and the Hod King is there's this sort of like sudden bloat. And the same goes for the Fall of Babel. That's because the Fall of Babel and the Hod King both kind of absorbed a 5th book. There was another book that I try to kind of like skip. And it was because when I sat down after writing 150 pages of Sinless Sins, it did dawn on me that no one's going to read this thing. And so, you're like, so do I write 5 books and no one's going to read, or write 4 books and no one's going to read? And so that's why I kind of structured it the way I did initially. And, if I had a time machine and I was a better writer, I would go back and do things differently. But, at the point early on, I knew exactly like the major points that I wanted to hit. There were things I had to just give up. I wanted to, like, there's another ringdom called Algez, that's sort of like the sister city to Pelthia, that was going to have really its own book. And that was going to be the book where Adam at the crest of the tower was going to have his part 2. That was going to be the 4th book. But I was sitting around plotting, and I was like, I don't know that this deserves the time and attention I would give. Yeah. So, in the end, I decided to go with 4 books, but that was all those decisions were made very early on. And when I quit writing the series after really the second book, it was largely because I was like, this is way too much work for nobody. I'm not going to just do this for myself.
And so until, I mean, you've recently become a full-time writer.
Mm-hmm.
And has your career been, up until this point, a professor at a college professor?
I did that for about 10 years, and that's when I was trying to be a poet. And then I don't know, have you ever had a freak out? Have you ever just like freaked out? You ever been like, I can't do this anymore?
Midlife
I'm
crisis
my
type
job.
thing.
I'm currently going through one of those, so
Okay.
Yeah, I feel that a little bit, sure.
I had a freak out, so I quit my job. I quit my job before I had this thing lined up, and it was sort of miraculous that several months later it started to take off. But it was really just, I quit my job because being a teacher is something you can't like half-ass. You're either in it, and of course a lot of people half-ass it. I mean, you can't.
mhm.
I couldn't half-ass it. Like I had to like believe in it, and I had to like be there and be useful for my students who I really cared a lot about, and I couldn't. I got burned out, so
Hmm.
I had to quit sort of abruptly. I came home at the end of a semester in the fall of 2016. The spring of 2016. I just told my wife, "Well, I'm not going back there ever again. I quit." She was very supportive, and it was about 2 or 3 months later that Mark Lawrence started to get interested in the book. So
Wow, that's crazy.
when I say that I'm lucky, I mean like I'm super duper lucky. That's my main
Hmm.
quality.
So you talked about your characters making decisions, and you talked about yourself as your backstory being a professor, and your main character, Senlin, is a headmaster of a
Mhm.
school. Is there some similarity there? Is there some of you and Senlin?
I think there's more of my, yeah, there's a little bit, absolutely. There's a lot of it. I mean, like, yes, there's a lot of the neurosis that I have, he embodies. But he also represents this sort of teacher that I did not particularly like in my experience in school, which is a teacher who seems to be most concerned with being right and being impressive and being in charge. And that was never the kind of teacher I particularly wanted to be. And it was the kind of peer I did not enjoy. So while there is a lot of his sort of neurotic habit that I absolutely drew for myself from, that egotism is something that I was frustrated with. And I'm sure everyone has careers where they look around their peers and I'm like, you're kind of a pill. And so, it's that's sort of where someone gets some of his DNA.
I
That's
think one
something
thing.
that I hadn't heard before is somebody writing a protagonist based on a person in real life that they're not that
Yeah, yeah.
fond of.
Really? Well,
Maybe that's just maybe if I talk to more authors about their inspirations for their protagonists,
Well,
it would come out.
I mean, Ryan, we talked about Mark Lawrence a little bit. Hopefully, he's not too fond of the inspiration of Jorg of Ancraft.
Oh, I'm sure Jorg of Ancraft is all personal accounts from his life.
just Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing about Senlin I thought was interesting is as you read him, you realize like this guy is pretty deeply flawed, but it's not like, oh, I'm the hero and I can't do this like one minor thing and that's my flaw. But like he's got a lot of issues and he doesn't necessarily like overcome these issues. He grows in a lot of ways, but he still remains who he is at the core. So I think that's what something that I really enjoyed reading the books is like Senlin seems like a really real guy and he isn't just getting these amazing powers because he's in a fantasy book. He's growing as a person would under these like strange and stressful situations.
Yeah, there are readers who really enjoy the sort of wish fulfillment aspect of fantasy. I enjoy it too. Like that's like it's a wonderful thing to have characters who are competent, who their growth is meteoric. And not meteoric, what's the other thing? Atmospheric? No, upward rising.
Exponential.
Exponential. It's going the right way, and
Mhm.
Cinnamon, that's not the case. I think that he starts off and he's arrogant, and then he gets humiliated, and then he gets a little bit better. But he's never at any point in the book like the Messiah. He's not like the chosen one. He's just a guy doing the best that he can with a lot of self-reflection. And so, readers who enjoy a different sort of protagonist or hero, I totally understand because it's a little it does cut a little close to home, having somebody who is just doing their best and it's not great. It's not great. But yeah, that's the kind of like character I like, because that's the kind of character I relate to. That's the kind of person that I am. I've always had a hard time really relating to burly heroic dudes who are just like, you just gotta like dig deep, gotta dig deep, fight through the pain, believe in yourself and do the thing. I'm like, I have never when I dig deep, I just fart a little bit. There's nothing down there. Like self-reflection is this laborious thing. It takes a lot of time, and it's slow and it's tedious. But I think the fruits are more long lasting than just like digging deep. But that's my opinion.
Ryan and Josh and I just recorded our review of The Hod King, book 3 of the series. And at one point, Josh said he was frustrated with Senlin because he was wanting him to kind of make this decision and I guess perform better. And he's like, come on, why couldn't he communicate? Why couldn't he get this done? Trying to kind of talk around the plot elements for those who haven't read it. But then Ryan brought up the point that, he was under all of this pressure and had all these things going on, and he's probably experiencing a lot of depression and just like couldn't do it. He couldn't dig deep. And it sounds like that's essentially how you write the character. You try to be like, if he was in this situation, how, what would he really be able to do and what would he not be able to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever someone says they're frustrated with someone, I say me too. But that's because like I'm frustrated with myself. I mean, there's so many things that in my life that if I just like had the right amount of fortitude or tenacity or courage or energy, I could do. And I am very good at making excuses for myself. And some of them I think are reasonable, others are not. But whenever I look at like another like external character, I'm like, no excuses for you. You must like be the super. And I go, so for me as a writer, I'm like, I'm gonna just treat these people as being the same, really fallible, in human people that I am myself. Again, it's just a matter of taste. It's not like a matter of morality. It's just what I prefer to write. Man.
I actually was a little frustrated with Senlin especially at the beginning of the first book. I was relating to it a bit too much, I think, when I was like, here's this bookish guy who's like out of his element, out of his comfort zone, and his wife is just, going off doing things, maybe having fun, who knows what, and he's just like trying to catch up to her. And I was like, man, this is hitting too close to home.
Yeah. Well, I think like for me with Senlin is, when he comes to the tower, he feels like he is perfectly prepared. He feels like he is the competent one. He's coming to, in some ways, just prove his expectations. He's a researcher coming to study an object. And what's for me fun about this series is he realizes that he's the object needing observation and study and reflection. Because he doesn't know himself, but yeah, he does come with that sense of like, I'm going to be just fine here. I have my plan. Everything's going to be all right, and very quickly that's stripped away from him, which I think is pretty much what I would call graduating from college.
Yes,
I have a plan. This is all going to be okay, and of course, it rarely is.
So, along with Senlin, as we consider like your other cast of characters, were there any that were easier or harder to write, or just came more naturally to you?
I get this question occasionally, and I want to make up somebody who was hard to write. They were all about the same. I would say that the easiest character to write was Byron, because Byron just showed up and started like mouthing off, and I could write 100 pages of Byron just being generally unpleasant to people in a very polite way. So he's the easiest to write. I think that Byron is closest to my sort of like internal snarky monologue, the things you don't say while you're standing there in line, or meeting somebody for the first time, you sort of don't say that, and he just says it. But the rest of the characters, like I think that like I deliberated over certain scenes. Like there's a scene in the Hod King between two characters who have a reunion that I rewrote and thought about and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. I mean, probably 5 or 6 times. And it wasn't like I didn't know exactly. You want to get it right. And so yeah, there's moments that are important that you labor over because yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's nothing worse than getting infatuated with a series, like a television series or a movie or a book series, and there's this like dynamic between two characters, and then like the conclusion is just flat. Like there's no
Yeah.
magnetism, there's no magic there, and so I really wanted to at least spare my readers that, like, hey, you read through 3 books and now they're just gonna be like, oh yeah, oh boy, oh well, yeah, and that's it. You gotta get it right. It has to have like humor and heart and depth and complexity. And so those are the scenes that even though I know the characters very well, you have to really pound on to get them right.
I'm trying to use vague terms. Is this
I want to know
a
too.
scene,
I want to know too.
Is this a scene that takes place on like a roller coaster-esque?
That is the scene, yes.
That is the scene.
Okay.
We did talk about this when we were recording our review, and we had some differing opinions, but
it's a big scene.
It is a big scene, and I'm glad that you talked about the process of writing it, because I imagine that similar situation would be difficult for at least for me to write.
The thing as far as a writer to realize is you're not writing to please anybody. You're writing to serve the story as best you can, and you are unfortunately the most qualified person to do it. And it is unfortunate because there are better writers, there are more attuned humans, there are more sensitive dialogists, but you unfortunately are the monkey in charge of this story. And I felt that a lot, while I was working on this, that, there's a responsibility, but it wasn't, I did the best I could.
So there's a lot of different themes in the series. And I'm just curious, you as the author, like, what would you want readers to pick up on from, like, how would you want readers to, I guess, apply things into their lives or grow as people as they read your books? Because there's a lot of, kind of deep tidbits layered throughout, and I really appreciate those.
I would say that, like, with the epigraphs in particular, I've been thinking about them a lot recently. They were not any one thing. They were not just purely world building nuggets. They were not purely plot guideposts. They were not purely red herrings or ironic tidbits. They were all of those things it melded together without warning. The epigraphs are, for me, a distillation of thoughts, but they're also like unreliable and purposely so. And I think this is like partly a result of me being a compositional teacher for so long. Like, the thing that I wanted to teach my students was not what to think or what the answer to any poem was, like, how to read this poem, what the interpretation was, how to really get it right in your analysis. My hope was just to teach them how to vet a source, how to analyze a point of view, how to have an inner critical process where they could, decide for themselves what things meant. And so much of the Books of Babel is unreliable. So much of especially those epigraphs, are unreliable, ambiguous, problematic. And that's by design, because I want readers to figure out what it means for them. And not to say I don't have opinions about what they mean, not to say I don't have thoughts about what, is going on with society, et cetera. But I think as a writer, my job is not to have the answers, but to present a platform and say, like, hey, here's a playing field for for you as the reader to decide what you think. And if you engage in a discussion with other readers on this playing field, like, great. And if I am forgotten and the work is irrelevant to that discussion, fine, because it's not about me. It's not about, it's not about legacy and all sort of stuff. It's about trying to give people opportunities to hone their own thoughts, explore their own sort of understanding of the world. So what does the book mean? What does the series mean? Like, I would never, ever insult readers by telling them, like, that's not the point. It's just, it's a playing field for them to figure out what they think.
Sometimes that's the hardest answer to get as a reader. I mean, and it absolutely makes sense, but think for myself, what? I don't want to do that. I want you to tell me what the answer is. I guess that's probably what you got a lot from your students too.
Yeah, absolutely. They just said, like, why don't you just tell me what it means so I can get an A and get out of here? I'm like, no, man. Like, the study of literature is not the study of my truth. It's the study of yourself. And so, like, that's what I always love about books. Literature, books are full of holes. You have to plug in your own meaning, and that is, for me, the sort of very slippery divide between pure entertainment and kind of deeper stuff. Pure entertainment doesn't really need you don't have to do any work. And there's nothing wrong with not doing any work. I watch a lot of stuff, read a lot of stuff where I'm doing any work. But stuff where you have to, like, make your own calls, make your own, sort of interpretations. I think that this is useful. There's a point to it, and I don't know. Your miles will vary.
So are you confirming that you are indeed Oren Robinson of the Daily Reverie?
No, he's much more clever than I am. He's a smarty pants. I'm just a guy, No, I love Oren Robinson. He's fun, but no, I can't say I am him. I'm definitely closer to Byron.
Okay.
You should tell him.
Byron wants, like, to make the flan. He wants to make the casserole. He wants to, chiffonade the mint, and that's more in my line than going to a party. For God's sake, I'd rather be fired out of a cannon and go to a party.
Have you read any Joe Abercrombie?
I have read chapters.
Okay. All right. Stephen had an interesting theory in which there was this writer in Abercrombie's work named Spillian Swarbrick, and Stephen's theory was that Spillian Swarbrick was Joe Abercrombie inserting himself into the story as Spillian.
Indeed.
So that's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Although if listeners have read his most recent, this theory ages very, very poorly. So hopefully the Oren Robinson theory doesn't go too far off the rails in book 4. Yeah, no, I like the idea that authors are inserting themselves in like fun little ways. I feel like that's what I would try to do if I were ever to write a book.
I don't think it's even. It would be fun. It can be fun. I'm sure authors do it. I don't think it's even necessary. The entire book is me inserting myself into the story. I mean, all the characters are some aspect of myself. It's not like I feel like, boy, I just wish I had some representation in this novel that I'm writing. There's only like 15 characters, or like a little sliver of my psychology. But if only there was one guy who was like it's all me. It's all like part of my character.
So one kind of fun scenario, maybe you can humor us and consider for a second. I assume that you've read Mark Lawrence's The Broken Empire trilogy. What would happen if Jorg of Ancraft meets the Tower of Babel? Do you think he would just knock it to the ground, destroy everything? Do you think he would rise to the top, be quickly smothered?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier. It's a good question. I think that the thing about Jorg is that he's tilting at windmills in some way, and I think that the tower is an endless windmill, and so I think there would always be something for him to rail or rage or bump against. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he would just like become a lord of port and settle down and marry and get and calm down. I think he would go until he burned out, and
Okay.
I think he would conquer the tower? Oh, I don't know. I don't think anyone can, because it's sort of always renewing. So by the time you've conquered the fifth ringdom, the fourth ringdom is renewed. It's
Yeah.
not it's not that simple. And I think he would have a lot of fun. I think that he would go out like Alexander,
Hmm.
just ultimately get like yeah overwhelmed by his success, eat too many grapes, get fat, and die.
So far, Stephen and I have read the first three books, and you've explored a few of these ringdoms.
Mm.
And now you mentioned earlier there's 64 in total.
Mm.
So that's a lot of unexplored territory. Now, we don't know how book 4 ends because we haven't read it yet. So, I mean, is there potential to explore further in the future? Is that something you're considering?
I'm considering it. Yeah. I can't really. It's hard to talk about it without like talking about the fourth book and the ending, etc.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I do think that like there's a lot of tower. There's a lot of tower. It's 4 books. There could be more. Whether there's an appetite among readers or writers to produce more, we have to wait and see. But I think that not everything has been said about the tower. It's not been elucidated to the point where you're like, yeah, well, we got that figured out. That's all sewed up. So
I'll take that. I'll take that answer.
Yeah, I like it. Appropriately mysterious and vague.
Yeah, that's what I do.
So we are low on time here, but you do have a book coming out next week, as we mentioned. Tell us a little bit about like what is a book release like in these? I mean, COVID is still raging in parts of the world, and I know that that's definitely affected the industry in a lot of ways. So, what's next week like for you for book release week?
So for the book release, I'm doing it with a local bookstore virtually, because that's the best option for all of us. So Main Point Books in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I don't know exactly where it is, will be hosting a online event. But what's fun about this event is that I'll be doing it with Ian Leno, who is the cover artist for the books. He was the original cover artist for the self-published books. He's the cover artist for the published, formerly published editions. And he's also like the guy that I've known since I was 9 years old. Like, we were kids and writing books together and being goofs. So it's really pretty awesome that we get to have this opportunity just to kind of celebrate the fact that he believed in me when no one else did. Like when I was writing the books 10 years ago, he was the guy who was like, yeah, I'll draw you a cover. I'll create a cover for you and help you, learn how to sell the books at conventions and teach you how to, do the kind of like pitch to strangers. Like, hey, do you like fantasy? No, sorry about that. Excuse me, sir. He told me how to get past that. And but also I've known him since I was in jams. So it's gonna be fun. There'll be a live event at 7, 8. I should really like look this stuff up before us. It'll be on Tuesday, the 9th at some time, and people can like find out on Twitter or my website, when that'll be exactly, because I don't know off the top of my head.
And can they purchase signed and maybe numbered copies through this bookstore or online?
Signed,
Okay.
yes, indeed. They're my current like go-to for shipping signed copies. Want to support the local brick and mortar, keep those independent stores like going strong. They are just wonderful folks at Main Point Books in Philadelphia. I don't know. Why didn't I look this up? I should know this. I should have their address. Like, anyway, Main Point Books outside of Philadelphia. They're the guys. They're doing signed copies for me. And also, I think there's an opportunity to get Ian to sign them too if you're into that. So, yeah. Great.
Do you do numbered copies at all?
Well, I mean, the sub press editions are numbered, and the Endorita press editions are numbered. When I was doing my own self-published editions, I didn't know how to count very high, so they weren't numbered. So
Just increases the value. If
I guess
1 through 10.
Yeah, I know. So no, there's not gonna be a numbered, paperback edition.
Really quick, I am curious, how does the subpress contracts work? Like, do they reach out to you and say, like, hey, we're interested in publishing a special edition of your book?
Yes, yes, that's yeah, that's, I mean,
Okay.
I am such a noob. I am such a neophyte to all this stuff, that when someone comes to me and says, like, oh, we like your work and we would like to do something special with it, I'm like, you would? Have you read it? Do you know who I am? I don't know who I am. So, like, all this sort of stuff is novel and fun. And the people at Subpress, Bill has just been like the most amazing person to work with. The artist for the Subpress editions, Tom Kidd, has been genuinely one of the kindest, most available, welcoming people I've met in the industry, and his work is just incredible. So it's been a absolute treat, a privilege and a treat. Yeah, I don't know if they see in me, but I don't tell them that. Just let them keep. I mean, I would like to keep making books with them if they want to, So don't spoil it.
Cool. We are at
Steven
time.
will keep buying them.
Yeah, I will keep. I love them.
I'll keep wishing I could buy them.
Thank you. That's great.
Well, we're at time. Thank you so much, Josiah, for coming on the show. We are currently reading the fourth book, and so we're going to try to get a review out soon. But like you said, it's a bit longer than the other books. The Hod King was longer, so
No,
it's taking a little bit longer.
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
we'll forgive you.
No.
I never really complain about long books, because if you like it, it's just more to enjoy. I don't understand why people would ever complain about long books, but that's a bit of a personal rant. Anyway, again, thank you so much. Check out Josiah on Twitter, on your website, I'm assuming, and definitely support your next book, support the local bookstores, etc. I'm sure you're going to be promoting all of this stuff as we get into release week, right?
Yes, hopefully, yes. Gotta keep it together,
All right, well, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.